Hi, I'm Michael Lang with Nexel Academy. This video is a part of our introductory course on building websites with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. If you've been with us since the last videos, we went over creating your first HTML page or adding some CSS and adding some JavaScript and going over some JavaScript basics. So if you haven't seen those yet, go ahead and check out the prior videos. I'll put the link at the top of the video. Now we're going to go ahead and continue. We're going to jump into JavaScript, access the DOM, we're going to have some forms on the page, we're going to interact with those forms, and we're going to update other parts of the page from what's in the form. So let's dive right into it. Alright, so here's where the code was left over last time. We have an HTML page with some script in it. It declares a JSON object variable, and it has a function in it that updates the console, and then we invoke that function a couple times. And then we just have some plain boilerplate HTML on the page. It looks something like this, and it outputs things to the console. So today we're going to build a form. Let's go ahead and start with that. Alright, so I'm going to get rid of these paragraphs. We don't want these anymore. And there we go. And what I'm going to do is now I'm going to add a form. To create a form, you have to have a form tag surrounding it. Well, not necessarily. You can have inputs on the page that are not inside of a form. If you wanted to submit a form to a server, then you would have it in a form tag. I'm going to go ahead and put it in a form just because it's the normal case. Now inside of a form, you can have labels and inputs. So I'm going to start with a label, and it's going to say first name. Because my teacher object has a first name and a last name property. So I'm going to try to replicate inputs for that. Now I could put the input after it, and then I could associate the label to that input with a for attribute. The other way to do it is to put the input inside of the label, and then the form knows that they're two associated, and they'll put them in proximity so they look correct. So to create a text input, there's an HTML element called input. So I'll do an input, and I'm going to give it an ID so that I can access it from JavaScript. I'll just go ahead and call it first name. I'm just going to give it the same spelling as my property on the teacher object. That is not required. It's just I'm going to follow a coding convention so that I can know what goes with what. I'm going to also give it a name. This won't be required in our case, but if you were going to submit your form to a server, the name attribute is going to be the form field name that is submitted with the forms, and if there's no name, it wouldn't be submitted to the server. So we just want to get in a good habit when you create inputs for forms, that you put an ID and a name on the form input, so it's going to work in all those cases. And the name should match the same thing I'm going to put in for ID. So now input is one of these elements that is browser rendered. You can't put anything inside of an element, so I don't need a closing input tag. Actually, when I tried to add a closing tag, it didn't think input was what I wanted to do, because you can't really do that. So instead, you can just leave it like this. You don't need a closing element. But the more semantically compliant way to do it is put a slash at the end of the input, just so you're declaring that yes, this is a self-closing tag, and now it's XML compliant as well. So might as well do it. So I'm going to do it. I'm just going to replicate this again for the last name. So copy, paste, rename. Last. Oh, look at that. It knows I want to do last name. It's only doing that because I have something called last name up here. So that's another reason I go with conventions. It will autocomplete stuff for me sometimes. So I've got some inputs in my form. I'm going to go ahead and update the page, see what it looks like. Here we go. So I got a first name and a last name attribute, or input. So, and they're stacked up. Those labels look like they go with those inputs. Now it's a little compact. We could do some CSS to make it look good. I'm going to go ahead and skip past that for now because that could take a little bit of time. So what do I need to do next? There's a couple of things. I'm going to want to populate these with the teacher that I currently have. So right now I've got a teacher with the name Mike Lang, so I would want the form to come up with the current teacher values. So if I'm loading an edit form for a teacher, they should come in pre-filled with what the current values are. So we'll do that. We will also need a way to update. Right now there's no buttons or anything here, so there's no way to click a button to say save. So we're going to add a button. So a button is with an HTML element called button. Pretty simple. So we do button. We're going to want to give it an ID of what it's doing. I'll come back to that. And then this is an element that does close, and you can put stuff inside the button. Generally, you're just going to put text that says what you want the button text to say. Sometimes you put icons in there as well. So maybe you got a little disk icon in there, or you got something else in there. All right. There are other attributes you could do, but we don't need any of those right now. We do want an ID on here so that we can grab it with our JavaScript. So I'm just going to call this button update teacher. And then now my form is complete. So if I load the page, there we go. I got the inputs and the save button. If I wanted these to wrap, I could do break tags in between. These are a self-closing tag also. You could also just do it by CSS. So either way. I'm going to go and take them out because I like them side by side when it's such a short form. All right, so the next thing we want to do, we want to populate this form, right? So I'm going to go ahead and do this at the top up here in our script. Let's see, so I need a function that will, okay, so I don't really want this add language anymore. Instead, what I want is a way to display this teacher in the page. So I'm going to rename this to display teacher, and it's only going to take in the teacher. Alrighty, I'm going to get rid of all this other stuff in here. I did note in the last video this was supposed to say languages. I don't know if you picked up on that. I did put a little caret in there to correct it in case you're watching through that video. But JavaScript is not going to tell you about your errors. That's kind of one of the pitfalls with JavaScript. Unless a piece of code executes, hits incorrect code, you're not going to know because there is no compile time for JavaScript. That is, I'm going to put a shout out to TypeScript for that reason. TypeScript would have caught that right away. So anyway, tangent complete. Let's move on to what we're actually going to do. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of those couple add language calls as well. So our display teacher, we need a way to grab these inputs so that we can update the values inside of them. So if one thing that's built into JavaScript is this object called document with a lowercase d. And there's a bunch of things on here for appending child. That's to modify the document itself. There is a bunch of get functions that you can grab elements from the document and put them into a variable. So we did put IDs on these, so I'm going to do get element by ID. Right, so I've got first name. There we go. I'm going to just pass in first name. Unlike CSS, I'm not going to put a hash symbol here. That was a special thing for CSS. So I'm just going to leave that off because the function is already called by ID. So it's known that it's an ID value. All right, so I've got that one. Now it's going to be totally discarded if I don't set it into a variable. So I want to go ahead and do that. I'm going to create a variable called first name elem, just whatever you want to call it. And I'm going to do another one for the last name. Last name. All right, so I've grabbed my two inputs down here. Let's see, next thing I want to do is I want to take this teacher and put the values inside of that input. So first name element dot, there is a value property. Now this one's not showing up in IntelliSense. It doesn't always quite grab everything. All it knows is that this is an HTML element. It doesn't know it's an input element. So, but it is an input element, so dynamically at runtime, it will have a value property. But the IntelliSense is not always going to pick up on that. It would be better in TypeScript as well. So we can set the value equal to something we want to set it to. So we're going to do teacher.firstname. We'll do the same thing for the last name value. Okay, I'll run the page. Nothing's happening. Remember, that's because you have to call a function. Just declaring it is not enough. So I'm going to call display teacher here, and I'm going to pass in my global variable that's the teacher. And let's see what happens. Still not working. Oh, so when it's not working, you should always check your developer tools. In case I haven't talked about that enough. always go to your developer tools. You're always going to have a problem no matter how smart you think you are. I run into it all the time myself, and I've been doing this for quite a few years. So here we see in the console, there is cannot set property value of null. Okay, I'm not sure what that means, but there is a little link here, index HTML20. I can click on that, and it'll take me to the line of code. It's like, okay. So here am I using value? Set property value of null. Okay, so back to the source. Just think about it for a second. Where's the word value on that line of code? So it's telling you exactly. So there's value, and it's saying cannot set that on null. Cannot set property value of null. So of null means the thing to the left. So first name element is null. Okay, so why did it not find it? That's where we need to dive down and look at this. So let's say, well, okay, let's console log it. This is one of the things I use console log for, is when I'm developing and something's not quite working, I just want to say, well, let's just log it and see what happens. If the dev tools on their own cannot help you solve it, then log out some variables and see what they are. So first name elem, log it. You can also log more than one thing, so I can put a message in here so that I know what it is. First name elem. Okay. So it's going to log both of those things. All right, it's still at the error over in the console. First name elem, null. Okay, so the whole input itself is null. So that means this thing is returning null. So all we have to do is backtrack. If this is null, it's coming from what's on the right side of the equal setting into it. So this thing is returning null. So we want to, first of all, double check our ID. So first name, it's highlighting when I double click on it. So that's how I know it's the same. If this one was different, double clicking on it wouldn't highlight the other ones. So VS Code tip there. So I'm double clicking on it, it's highlighted, it's full thing. So it's the right thing, okay? All right, so now this breaks down to how HTML loads and runs JavaScript and when it does that. So when the browser is downloading this HTML file, it's going to try to start executing stuff and rendering stuff as soon as it can, because users are impatient. If your page takes too long to render, they're going to go away. So the browser is going to try to start running this code immediately when it sees it. So if I'm going down this page here and I'm saying, okay, declaring a teacher, I'm declaring a function, and then I'm calling that function, and then, so at this point of calling it, it's doing all the lines of code in here. So then it's going to call get element by ID first name. Okay, well, does that exist above the script block? No, that's why it returns null, because it wasn't able to find it yet. We called display teacher too soon. So one way to do this would be move the script to the end of the file. Script. So I'll just take this whole thing here. I could just move the entire script block to the end, really. So I'll just go ahead and do that. All right, so those are all my script here at the end. All right, I'll save that and try it out. Oh, look, the name's populated. Great. No more errors. The console's logging out. First name elem, and then there's the element rendered just to text. And as I hover over it, it's highlighting the element on the page. So I know that's working. All right, so I can go and get rid of my console log. You generally don't want to deploy an app to production to like a real site running with a bunch of console logs in it. So once you've gotten past your console log and it's solved your problem, delete it. You don't want people seeing all that console log output. All right, so we've got our form being updated with the teacher that was already been set. So great, we got that first skill. So let's see, what if we wanted to have a read-only view of this teacher? How about we try that next? All right, so come over to the page. Right now I just have a form. So let me go ahead and wrap this. Because when I switch to read-only view, I'm going to want to hide the edit view and then have like a little button to re-enable it. So I'm going to show both of those at once, or I'm going to show one at a time and I'm going to toggle between them. So to make that easy, I'm going to wrap each section into a container, just an arbitrary container, just so that I have one thing to hide and show. So I'm going to go ahead and create a div to wrap this, and I need to give it an ID so I can grab it. Let's see, view teacher. And I'm going to move this form inside of it. If I save that and show it, it still looks the same. So this element was purely just for ease of using in JavaScript. Now I can go ahead and create another div, this one with an ID of, oh, this one's the view teacher. That's what I meant to do. This one is edit teacher. Okay, so we need to come up with what would be a good read-only view of this teacher. I'm going to do a little inline style just to make this real quick and easy. I would later move this to a CSS file, but I'm just playing around right now. So I'm going to do it in an inline style. Let's say, what if we just want to put a border on it? Let's say solid gray, sure. And maybe we want some padding, just so it's not, the text isn't touching the side of the border. And I'll come back and we'll add more after that. So what else do we want to do? I would say maybe the teacher name in bold, like kind of like maybe a title. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to do an H2. And so I need to put the teacher name here. How do I do that? So my script isn't really running yet, so there's nothing to even grab onto. Also, HTML doesn't just grab stuff and put it in. JavaScript has to grab the element and shove something into it. So in order to do that, remember, we have to put an ID on it so we can grab it. So I'll go ahead and put teacher name as the ID of this element. I can put whatever I want here. It's probably really never going to seem because I'm going to replace it with the real teacher afterwards. So what other thing do we have in our teacher? We've got languages also. So maybe we want to have a way to display the languages of that teacher. A good thing to show a list of things is with an ordered list or an unordered list. I'm going to choose an unordered list because these aren't in any particular order. So I'm just going to create a UL. And this is where I could create some list items. I'll go ahead and hardcode with C# for now. Let's just see what it looks like. Okay, there we go. So we're not updating this entire element yet. So there's the ... there's the C#. So that's going to be where the first and last name goes, and this is where the language list is going to go. So I'll go ahead and start with that. All right, so if I want to grab this UL and add stuff to it, again, that means that I need an ID on it. Let's say, how about teacher languages? Be a good ID. All right. So let's go ahead and update next what this view element looks like. So for now, we'll just keep them both the edit form and the view only both on the screen at once. We'll do toggling later. So let's come back to display teacher. Now we got a few more elements we want to grab. We want to grab teacher name. So let me grab that. I'm just going to do a copy paste to make sure I don't mistype something. And teacher name elem. Now I can do teacher name elem. Now this one is not an input box. So inputs had a value property, but plain text elements like headings and paragraphs and so forth don't have a value property. Instead, they have an inner HTML and an inner text. So the difference between the two is inner HTML, you can give it any arbitrary HTML snippet and it'll get that entire thing. Inner text is you just want to give the text node inside of that element. So I'm going to go ahead and do the inner text in this case. And I'm going to set it to the teacher first name plus, I'm going to do a space, and then plus teacher, teacher last name. See what that looks like. There we go. So now that is updating. Good. So sometimes people don't like this format where you see a bunch of pluses and gaps and so forth in the middle of the string you're outputting. There is another way to do this called string interpolation. So what you do here is instead of starting a string with a tick mark, you do it with the back tick. That is the one that's above the tab key normally. You see it's got a little slant to it there. And then inside of here, we can do a $sign and curly braces to mean, hey, this is a variable value that needs to be replaced into this spot. Okay. And then we could just take all that junk out of there. We could do another replacement. And then another back tick to end it. And now see the semicolon's in the right color now. When it was a single quote, it's also the red color, so you know, oh, that's part of the string, and so does everything down here. So the color coding is kind of giving us a clue. Oh, we typed the wrong one. So make it a back tick, and now everything goes back to the color it should be. So now that one reads a little bit better. You can see at a glance, oh, it's the first name, a space, and a last name. So it makes it a little bit easier to tell what's going on. When you got longer strings and more replacements, it becomes even more clear to do it with string interpolation. So save that and check. Still runs the same way. So there's not really an advantage one way in terms of performance. It's just really about readability. Which one reads better to you? Alrighty, so now what's next? We want to update the skills list. So let's grab that element, teacher languages. This one's going to be a little different because it's not just text we're putting in here. Languages, list, document, get element by ID, teacher languages. All right. So the next thing we want to do here is we want to create some nodes because we want to create some list items and then replace what's inside of that owner list with our new list items. Every time we do an update, we don't want to just keep adding list items because if you call display teacher twice, it won't get rid of the old ones and you'll just keep adding the same list with one more each time you add a skill. So you want it to clear out the old and then replace with the current ones each time. So that's what we're going to do. We are going to first languages list dot enter HTML equals empty string. So that's going to clear it out. If I come over and refresh the page, you see the C# one, the template one is not there anymore. Okay, so now we want to replace it with the new ones. So a good way to do that is we want to iterate over all of those languages in the teacher list. So how about we do a for each over that? So a teacher, we get down to the languages. Now we can do for each, and that is, I shouldn't have put array in there. Languages is an array. So for each is going to happen for each item in the languages list, which if we recall is a list of strings. So each item in this for each will be a string. So this where it says element here, we can replace this with whatever variable name we want. So I'm going to call it lang because it is a language. And then it gives us a code block to fill in. So we can do whatever we want for each item in that list. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a list item node, and we're going to put the text inside the list item node, and then we're going to add that to the languages list. So let's create a node equals document. There is a helper function on document called create element. Here we go, create element, and it wants to know tag name. So list item is the tag we want. All right, so that was pretty easy. Running it now doesn't do anything because we didn't actually add that node to the document yet. So we can do languages. No, we want to do languages list. There we go. AppendChild node. So what happens here? Okay, it shows 2 bullet points. All right. Well, we do have 2 languages in the list, so it's creating 2 elements just like we told it to. We didn't say what text to put in the list item, so it created empty list item nodes. So let's inspect that. We can see, oh, teacher languages has 2 list items in it. So now on the node, we can do something to append some text inside of that list item. So there's another AppendChild on this, and this one's a node itself, so we can do another document, create element, and then we actually want to create we don't want to create an element, we want to create a text node. There it is, text node, and this one's the data that's the string that specifies the node value property of the text node. Okay, so that's where we want our language to go. This lang here is that string language, so we're just going to put lang right there. Now this one, notice this one is inline here, whereas this one is up here and set into a variable. They both work. I could have also done this. I could have done var text node equals that, and then add a text node here. The reason I didn't do that is because I'm only going to use text node in this one spot. So I could just forego the variable itself and just create that text node and pass it directly into AppendChild. So that's what I did. So I'm going to go back to that. We could actually go ahead and create this element in here and do a lot of magic to put all this kind of in one line of code too. That would be a little bit more hard to read, all this stuff kind of on one line, so I'm just going to leave it this 3 lines. Save that, and now we've got our 2 languages that are in this list. So pretty cool. All right, so next thing we want to do, we want a way for this instructor to be able to add skills. So I think we're going to do that on the read-only view instead of doing it up here in the form. We could do it up in the form too. It really doesn't matter. But I'm going to go ahead and put it in the form. So let's see. Under languages, I'm just going to put a little box underneath for adding. Let's see. So I'm going to create a div. And inside this div, I'm just going to start with a label. And that label is going to say add skill. Colon, and then an input. And it needs an ID, so I can grab it. And let's see, a name. And that's good, we got our input. Let's make it self-closing. Now that we have an input, let's save that and see it. Yeah, that looks kind of good. We do want a button over here so we can actually add it. So let's come back over here, let's add a button. It's going to say add. So I could add an ID here. I don't necessarily need to have one because I don't need to grab this from our JavaScript, but I do need to invoke a function. So I'm going to type on click. My cursor must be somewhere else. There we go. On click, and then I can call a function directly from this on click attribute. So I'm going to create a new function called add skill. So I'm just going to go put that there, and now I need to go down below and add a function called add skill. Don't forget the function keyword. Add skill. It's not going to take any arguments, right? It doesn't take any arguments here because we need to pull the value out of this input. All right, so the first thing we'll do, I'm going to copy one of those lines, skill, input. The ID is skill, correct? Let's double check that. Sure is. All right. So we want to take this and we want to add it to the, I'm going to take the value of the skill input. Remember, inputs have a value. Let's see, what if they, okay, we'll come back to what if they didn't do anything with it. So teacher, we want to update that raw teacher list. So languages, push, we did this in the last video. What value we want to put in? Let's put in the value of the skill input. Okay. Now this is going to update that underlying teacher, but if we're going to change it, we probably want to display it again, right? So I'm going to go ahead and call display teacher, pass in the teacher again. All right, so what else? Yeah, let's try that. Let's type in Angular, hit add. There we go, I did add Angular. Good. What else? TypeScript. There we go. Yep, it keeps working. Keeps adding elements. Looks like that's working. What if I do a blank one and hit add? Oh, it's adding blank items. We probably don't want that, so we could clean that up a little bit. We could do something like if skill input value is an empty string, return. Now when I add with blank, it's not going to do anything. Add something in it, it adds it. Oh, I can see it. It's not clear. It's not clearing out the input box. So I keep hitting add. If I double click it or something, it's going to add it more than once. So let's fix that. You could do that. So after we add the teacher, we can clear out the box, right? So let's figure out how to do that. If you go back to that skill input, go back to the value. This is a get and a set value. So I can just set it to an empty string. Now it's empty. So now if I click add when it's empty, that's still empty. That's from the prior change. If I add something, hit add, the box is now empty. So if I happen to hit add more than once, it's not going to add it more than once. So good. Alrighty, so we're displaying the teacher, we're clearing out the value. I think the only thing left was a little cleanup to show and hide the different sections based on which one is being edited or viewed. So we could do that. We could put it, let's see, so if I hit save, maybe I should switch over to view right away. Does that make sense? Actually, if I hit save, it's not actually doing anything. Did you notice that I hit a number and hit save, and like the whole page reloaded? That's kind of what forms do. They will by default do that, but we can override the save button to do something else. I'm going to, all right, I can just go to do an onClick. OnClick equals save teacher. Okay, so that means I need to declare save teacher. So let me go ahead and do that. Function, save teacher. We're just going to save what's in the input. So before, let's see, we had inputs. Oh, we didn't grab them though. Right, so they're called, oh, first name and last name we did. So here we go, those are the elements. So we're going to grab those, and we want to take those values and update the teacher from them. So teacher first name equals first name element dot value. Teacher last name equals last name element dot value. Okay, let's try that out. Change my first name. Okay, it just still reloaded the page. So what we want to do is tell it to prevent the default. What happened there? So it did update it, but then it flickered. Let's check prevent default up here. All right, this is where Google comes in. HTML element or button, click prevent default. So event prevent default. That's what I really wanted. There we go. Now it's not refreshing the browser. So I can update the name here and hit save, and it's not updating down here yet, but it's not refreshing the browser anymore. So problem one solved. Notice I had to look that up on Google. I don't memorize every single little function in JavaScript. So don't worry, as a junior developer, you don't have to memorize every single thing in order to consider yourself a developer. What you need to be able to do is look it up. See how I was able to just click over Google, and I knew what to type to search for something. So I wouldn't have to type prevent default with no space. You could type button click prevent navigation, or there's a lot of ways you could say that and you'd get back to the same documentation. So you just got to think about what do you want to do and express that to Google, and it'll tell you the right resource to tell how to do that. So alrighty, I usually do Angular development, so that's not really an issue for me most of the time. So I just look it up when I'm doing JavaScript. Alright, so what did I want to do again? Oh yes, I want to update the text down here. So same way we did that before. I'm saving the teacher, I'm updating the value, so I need to tell it to display the teacher again, just like last time I updated the teacher. Okay, so let's try it again. Save. Yay, there it is. So everything's updating down here. I can add something here. I can put something here and save. It's all still updating, everything's staying. So it's kind of like I have a little spa application here, single page app. Everything's in line here. So the only thing I'm not doing is saving to a server, so it'll remember the next time. Because as I'm refreshing, it's back to what was defined in the code. So that'll be for another day, calling APIs. Alrighty, so I've got that. The only other thing I wanted to do was toggle views. So let's see. How about on save teacher is when we do a toggle. I think also when the page is loaded, we probably don't want the view version shown up. We want to start with the edit form. You could decide otherwise. Maybe you want to show the view form and then toggle the edit form if they click a button. It really doesn't matter, whichever way you prefer to do it. So on save teacher, I want to call some code to, let's see, I need to grab onto each div. So I'm going to grab the view teacher. So var view div equals document, get element by ID, view teacher. What about edit div? Document, get element by ID, and what was that one called? Let's go grab it. It is edit teacher. Is it in there? So what I want to do is set display to none. Let's actually practice that and come over here and look. So if I inspect this element, I'm going to go up to the div. So what style could I set? Let's say, is there a visibility? Oh yeah, there's visible, there's hidden. I could do it that way. That one, let's see if I come back over to hidden. Notice this is a footer still down below. By making it hidden, it's still taking the space in the DOM. So we probably don't want to do visibility. That just makes it disappear, but it still takes up flow space. The other one that's available is display, and notice display is down here as block, inherited from the user agent. So, but we can override that to none, and now it disappears, and now the footer moves back up. So it's like the element is not even on the page. So I think display none is the one we want to go with. So we could do that one of two ways. We could actually just update style directly on the element. The other way we could do it is by setting a class. So it's really up to you which way you want to go in that. Let's see. So if I'm saving the teacher, I want to do edit div. I want to hide it. Set style. Let's just look that up. Here we go again. Gotta look something up. HTML element style from JavaScript. Okay, style property. Style.color equals red. So yeah, we could do something like this. All right, so I'm going to grab that. Style.display equals none. The edit one we want to disappear on save, and the view div style display equals, let's change that back to block. So for saving a teacher, we'll do that. So let's switch over and see what that does. Okay, so we're still seeing both because on page load we didn't hide the view. But if I hit save, the form disappeared and now this one is visible. And if I overlook here at the div, I'll see this one has display block, edit teacher has display none. So that's good. It did what I wanted. Here's the display block on that one. This one's got the display none. So now I'd probably want to have like an edit link on here, and when I'm clicking that, just do the opposite. So you could easily do that. Let's see, function toggle edit. Well, let's do a lowercase t for our convention. All right, and this is where all we'd have to do is swap out these two. None here and block here. So if I hit save, oh, we don't have anything to click on to do that, right? So we need to do that. Let's see, where do we want to put that? Maybe under add skill. So let's do another div here. Let's do maybe an anchor tag. We're going to set the navigation to go nowhere. But we're going to do on click equals, I'll put the text to say edit. What's the function name again? Let's see, toggle edit. I'm going to take that, put it in here. So we're going to call the toggle edit function if they hit that link. So save, it's got that. Click edit. Oh, it's not working. Oh, there we go. Let's see. Edit div is not defined. We could click on here and we could see where that is. Oh, really? So yeah, edit div is not in scope. So I forgot to copy over these couple lines. So really all I have to do is look at the error and say edit div is not defined. Okay, yeah, well I could see within that function edit div was never set to anything, so that makes sense. So all I have to do is copy these over again. There we go. All right, so let's click edit. Now only the edit form is visible. Click save, only that's visible. So now they're going back and forth. Now the only thing left over is that this page load, one of them is visible. So how about maybe at the beginning, we update the display and we toggle edit. So we're gonna start the page in edit view. Okay, I just did it that way because I had a toggle edit button function and I didn't want to write the other one. So hit save, it toggles over, edit, it toggles back. So there we go. We got a single page app. We've got an edit view and a display view, and within the display view we can add sub items to it. So there we go. That's what I wanted to go today with this. So you should be able to use this to build interactive applications. Now this wasn't what I would call a highly scalable app. If you're going to build a big app with a lot of forms, this is like probably not the best way to organize the code. The lines of code of the types of things you need to do are all correct, but you're probably going to organize these up into a better way. So that's one reason why a lot of people use either Angular or React or Vue to like make it easy to build big applications and organize it better. I mean, we could cut a lot of the code out of this file just by moving the script to an external JavaScript file too. So let's see. What page is this? Index.js. So this is the JavaScript for the index page. There's no naming convention on that. It doesn't really match up. You could call the JavaScript file whatever you want. It really doesn't matter. I'm just going to copy that out, put it in here. So all I did was move the script over. Now it's acting like it doesn't know anything. None of the script is running because I forgot to put on the source. Now at source, it put the equal in the double quotes for me. If I do control space, it'll suggest the file names. So there we go, index.js. Now the JavaScript is running again. So now it's not too bad. It's just the markup and then a call out to the JavaScript file. It's not too bad. But still, this is a lot of stuff going on in here. So you want to be careful how you refactor stuff. You might want to put some common logic you do all the time in various helper functions. So there's some things you might want to do organizationally to make a bigger file, bigger application. But this isn't too bad to start. So all right, so I think that is the last video in our JavaScript series. Check back to the prior ones. If anything here was a little too hard to comprehend at the start, you might have missed a prior video. We do have some other advanced courses that cover Angular in more depth and so forth, so check out our other courses for all of that information. So I'll see you in the next course.